Yeah, hello. So I'm back again. So we are, let's discuss a paper right after reading it. And let us introduce ourselves first. So Yota, please.
Yes, I'm Yota Kawashima. I'm doing a research assistant.
And Ryochi?
Yeah, I'm Ryoichi Watanabe at Kyoto University, Japan, and a PhD student.
And I'm Aniko Kustora. I'm a PhD, I'm a PhD student. And we are going to discuss, or I will be summarizing the paper that we are discussing today. And this paper is Evolutionary Advantages of Stimulus-Driven EEG phase transitions in the upper cortical layers. And it was written by Robert Kozma, Bernard Bars, and Natalie Geld. And it was published in the Frontiers in System Neuroscience in 2021. And yeah, so this is a relatively short paper. However, it was highly complex and very detailed, and it actually encompassed or contained so much information. So I am under no illusions that I will be able to actually summarize this sufficiently, but I will try to bring up most of the points that they mentioned and how I understood it. Yeah, I will try my best. So basically they start by summarizing and comparing or bringing up this interesting point of the fact that computers are highly beneficial and we are able to do amazing things with neural networks. And however, they have much less effective way to use energy in a way as compared to the human brains or any kind of brains. And the computational efficiency is just not there or not comparable. And so they kind of suggest that if we are, and yes, so one of the main limitations is the thermodynamics and the limitations of like engineering in a way, how I understand this. And so they suggest that basically, maybe it's a good idea to use brain-inspired thermodynamics models of computing to inform or maybe to provide an additional perspective or additional information to computer engineering and machine learning. But then how does actually the brain works, thermodynamically? And this is actually this is a very complicated and fascinating question. And there has been so much work done. So again, I won't be able to summarize it all, but so I will just try my best. So first they mention, so basically they go through a few historical kind of landmarks or important steps in understanding the like different processing models of the brain. And they specifically discussed the global workspace theory, which was of course proposed by Bars. And basically they mention, or they talk about the fact that many neural models or neural processing frameworks, they mostly include sections or they mostly include the combination of serial processing and non-serial processing. So for example, a serial processing of perception, and then a non-serial aspect of like memory or knowledge. And then they also, for example, specifically the global workspace theory differentiates between conscious and unconscious aspects of perception and processing. And they argue that there are many theories, basically there's a whole family of global workspace-like theories of consciousness and cognitive research, and they have a lot of convergence. And they suggest that actually there seems to be this kind of convergence of idea. It also appears in when it comes to EEG research or electrophysiological research. And so they propose a couple of interesting, for me, new concepts, but they have been talking about this for quite a while now, just based on the papers they have been cited. So, and so basically they have 7 different propositions. So the first proposition describes wave packets, which are, and I will just really try to define them as well as I could understood it. So basically they appear as part of the perception action cycle. So for example, when a new information like signal occurs in the brain, and they are specific, highly synchronized activity patterns with a specific spatial temporal kind of features or characteristics. And they are proposed to be in the beta and gamma frequency hertz, which is between 20 and 80 hertz. And then these wave packets like appear when like something induces them, like a new information, and then they basically shortly after collapse within the time window of 100 milliseconds. And then they argue that this collapse of these wave packets emphasizes or corresponds to the importance of the 10 hertz frequency activity, which has been very often found as a crucial frequency range when it comes to perception and in general like cortical activity. And then these wave packets also they also can propagate to phase cones, which is basically just basically like this synchronized activity propagates to neural or cortical layers. And they say that this is in a form or in the form of phase cones. Yes, so, and they say that this is a very important kind of step in their, or in the description, the thermodynamic characterization of the brain. They also, as the proposition 2 states, that these wave packets also have a very specific energy cycle. Basically, they go from highly ordered to disordered states. So they go from, or they fluctuate between highly synchronized or highly organized and synchronous states from disorganized and low synchronous states. And that also fits the whole like cortical system dynamics as we understand. So at this point, they mentioned the concept of criticality, and there has been this idea around that brains are self, or they basically they have this characteristic of self-organized criticality, which basically means that there are points of attractor states which the system kind of tries to get to, or that is how I understand it. Yes, and then they also mention the so-called neuropercolation model of criticality, which I could not understood fully, but is what I understood from it, that the long axonal connections is very important in it, and basically this neuropercolation model describes how the brain fluctuates between highly organized and disorganized states, and how it also incorporates noise and yeah, this large-scale synchrony and dyssynchrony fluctuations. And they also mentioned that there seem to be, or this is something that I was a bit unsure whether this is part of the of criticality, this kind of phase, but they mention this concept called metastable brain oscillation. And what I think here they mean that basically there are phases or these kind of periods when the brain oscillations seem to be in a metastable period, and then sometimes they have like transient periods. And then it also it is reflected in perception. They also mention in relation to this their theory of perception, or Kozma and Freeman's theory of perception, which is called the cinematic theory of perception, and that which is about different frames and different again how perception works in a frame-like and in a serial way. And finally, they go through, so they also mentioned that probably these phase transitions are very important in the context of the global neural workspace theory, because they propose that basically how these phase transitions occur and when they propagate through different layers, that can actually be considered, or basically they are the perceptual, like they kind of they are the signatures and neural signatures of perceptual broadcast, which is a very important concept in global workspace theory. So those are the kind of main guiding forces. And then they discuss theoretical models and theoretical and mathematical models of how this whole system could work, with criticality in mind, and how these different long axons could contribute to upkeeping this system. And additionally, they also mention the capillary astrocyte neuron model, which is again also contributes to this like basically this whole system of synchrony and transitions. And yeah, I think this is what I could quickly summarize from this paper. Let me just again reiterate that we have been reading this paper in 2 hours, and this is what I could get out of it. So yeah, please add to this, guys, help.
Yeah, great job, Aniko. I think you understood better than I did, actually. So what I could get from this paper is that, the beta, gamma range, responses are something related to perception, and that, response is also like fluctuated with a slow wave, not slow wave, like at the alpha, not alpha on some frequency range. Let's say, this packed, or responses is distributed like separately in the temporal domain and also the spatial domain, and that's just what I got from this paper, to be honest. And also they tried to include some metabolic processes, which I think is unique because there are a lot of paper talking about the cognitive processes, but they tend to focus on the physiology, electrical physiology, not the metabolic system. So that's kind of unique. And also, like, they're talking about some energy consumption stuff, which I couldn't understand, but like they talking about like how the energy is consumed, and also how or they are talking about like something about heat. I think the high frequency responses and accompany with heat or energy consumption that can be removed by the blood flow or something, which is quite a engineering perspective. And I don't think that kind of discussion have not been done in the cognitive processes literature a lot. So, but again, as Nico mentioned, and the authors referred a lot of previously proposed models. So to understand, or this paper is, I think, the collection of model to understand the cognition. So first you need to understand each model. There are a lot, but you have to understand and then how they can be connected to explain and the cognitive system. And I think their point is that that is something similar to global neural workspace theory or something. But this is what I got from this paper and just my summary. And yes.
Yeah, I think they also mentioned, and I think maybe the Freestone, like Carl Freestone, and the whole free energy principle that is also kind of trying to talk about thermodynamics or kind of the metabolic aspects or energy consumption in the brain. But I completely agree, and like based on my knowledge so far, I think it's quite unique to discuss this kind of more physics or thermodynamics based approach of neural functioning. So I agree, it's very interesting.
Yes, in fact, I couldn't understand well this study, but so I can understand the each part, for example, the first rate entropy or some dynamics and the free energy principle. Yeah, I understand what the author said, and then for the neurodynamics and the EEG patterns and the frequency or oscillation, yeah, I understand what the author want to say. And finally, for cognition and the global workspace theory, yeah, I see what the author said, but I can't understand how to integrate and how to explain and what the author wanted to say in this paper. Sorry, I can't understand. This is my comment and my understanding.
Yeah, I had the same issue. That I think it's very difficult to kind of understand why or what is the connecting tissue between these concepts. And yeah, I was maybe thinking that I should have read other papers to understand this, and maybe then I would have got this a bit more easily. But yeah, I also don't, like, I guess they are proposing a framework of ideas, but it's hard to understand why are exactly these propositions mentioned. And yeah, I agree.
So my kind of question is that, what kind of, scale the author is trying to, investigate or focusing on, because the title says EEG and some of their, preposition is from EEG results, but they are talking about, not the very fine, spatial resolution scale, like processes, specifically the, the metabolic system, for example, should be, spatially, quite, small. And also in the figure 2, they seems to talking about the, the neurons and neural spike. So I am wondering whether, this whole models is built up on the neural or the spike level, processes, or are they try to understand the EEG mechanism? Or yeah, that's a kind of complex and I couldn't understand. But probably based on EEG findings, they infer that, okay, given this finding or observation at the micro scale, this kind of processes should be happening. And if so, we can, have this model and also this model and this model, then can be explained. Or, but anyway, it's a bit difficult, and I couldn't see the, of course this, the proposal is different from global neural space theory, but I think the big picture sense, what they are talking about, almost the same, probably. I don't know. What do you think? Probably the frequency, stuff is something different from global neural space theory. But yeah, again, it's a bit difficult to understand.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about global neural workspace theory, or how does that relate to with this frequency related activity or specific frequency related activity. I think it's, in a way, they are trying to kind of examine these oscillatory activities that we usually in like psychology research, we just accept that, yeah, there are these frequency activities and they exist and they may be indexing something. But then, of course, there's a lot of questions. We don't know how and why they are there. What are they doing? And I think in that way, it's a very interesting idea to really functionally separate specific frequency ranges and in a way kind of explain the transition between them and kind of like why they exist. Yeah, but I think there's a lot of, or for me at least, there's a lot of questions that I still have and a lot of concepts I don't quite understand. Yeah, I think in general, they put a lot of emphasis on this like 10 Hertz frequency range, or like 10 Hertz activity or 100 milliseconds kind of temporal window as a crucial kind of evidence for their model. And I was actually wondering, because we have been reading a lot of different papers on temporal perception, or for example, differentiation of, two stimuli. So one of the main argument they mention is that in sensory perception, if you show like a stimuli within 100 milliseconds, then it's usually experienced as a single stimuli instead of two. But then I was actually a bit skeptical, because I think we have been like previously we have been reading up papers where they are trying to kind of disentangle and make sure whether people are indeed perceiving things differently. And I'm also unsure, maybe they mentioned, but why exactly this 10 hertz? Like, do you guys remember of anything like that?
Yeah, I had exactly the same question, and if I remember correctly, they said that the previous literature suggests that 100 millisecond is the time window which we need to consider, something like that. But I could not understand that part. Yeah. Yoichi, did you find?
Yeah, and I think the authors and the Barth said G global workspace theory, not global neural workspace theory from Duan. And I think the global neural workspace theory from Duan shows the gamma oscillation of rate activity is the brain and so Duan's theory focus on the rate activity of the brain. So, and I think we read these studies, so rate activity is important for GNW, we understand, but I think in this study, the authors use the other, assumption, and in fact, so the person I think in this study, the author didn't use the Duan's theory and not cited one, I think. So, and so I think the confused point we have. In fact, so in this study, the authors point out that after a little bit earlier upbrain activity, until 100 milliseconds. So, sorry, just comment, and I think so. So this is different from the GNW from Duan's one.
So they are actually cite the Hans paper from 1998, but just I think once in the introduction about global workspace theories, and when they mention these families of global workspace like theories. But they also mention, or they also cite Tononi and Koch, which kind of, I mean, is that one of the IIT papers, perhaps? So then, in a way, that's also like they also kind of integrating those into the global workspace like theories. Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't quite sure actually. I don't think they clarify how does, I guess they mentioned that potentially these phase transitions may and gradient cones may contribute to the global broadcasting of percepts, and and in that way, that would be what we assume is the content of consciousness. But I was not sure how does these different propositions actually influence the content or the level of consciousness in any way. Yeah, I would be interested in hearing that.
Yeah, my understanding is that, these content of consciousness stuff should be kind of encoded within the 100 millisecond. And as long as that kind of information is broadcasted and processed, you will have some kind of, conscious experiences. But as you mentioned, they did not explain why, within 100 millisecond, such kind of information is encoded. And also, what is the mechanism of, the kind of computation within 100 milliseconds. So probably, I don't know, but like one of, their model talking about, the thermal dynamics wave pack stuff. And that is somehow related to, the contents of consciousness and entropy stuff. If I remember correctly, they are talking about the entropy. So the complexity, not complexity, sorry, the entropy reduced within the 100 millisecond. It means like imagine that we have a lot of possible, conscious contents, and within which we will pick one as an, experiences. That means that the entropy is very large, but will be in a very small while you are perceiving one thing. And somehow, that entropy stuff can explain the content of consciousness, but I'm not sure. This is just my, guess. Yeah, 100% guess. So probably it's not correct.
Yeah, do you have any other questions or kind of things that you were wondering about in relation to this paper?
So in the title, they said that the evolution stuff or the evolutional advantage of something. And is it something related to the, the length of axon? Or I think in the discussion, they started to talk about the, evolution stuff, but I, to be honest, couldn't understand how, this evolution happened or within this, the model or frameworks. Yeah, I now remember that, the rabbit story. But to be honest, I couldn't understand that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't, I didn't understood that either. I think what they mean is that because of the phase transitions, probably your cortical system has like it's able to kind of jump out of an ongoing state and kind of notice things. I guess that was because, yeah, so you mentioned the rabbit. So basically they describe that this 100 milliseconds is a very short and effective time for a rabbit to, like a wild rabbit, to notice if a predator attacks it. And they mentioned that like this specific time window is sufficient to develop a successful escape strategy. But I genuinely don't understand why.
So I heard, or as you know, that I'm now taking a weekend online course, and and there I had a lecture about the somatosensory system. And then I and Ryoichi read the paper a few weeks ago while Aniko is on holiday. And there that I heard that the global workspace theory can be applicable to non primate animals or not human, such as monkey and some other animals. But when you're talking about the late activity, we should be careful because the size of brain is different across species. So in that case, so in the human, for example, when we say late activity, it tends to refer like activity after 300 milliseconds. But this is because we have this brain size. But if you are talking about the brain of, let's say, monkey, the late activity will be much earlier. Can be, let's say, 100 milliseconds after stimulus onset, for example. So given that story, I am not sure whether this 100 millisecond is consistent across species as proposed in this paper, because first they are talking about the human brain, obviously, and then they raise an example of rabbits, but I'm sure that definitely the size of brain is different between humans and rabbits. So I'm wondering whether this 100 millisecond is consistent across our species. But this is just my comment, and my guess is that probably different across species, but not sure.
Yeah, so they use the little squirrely line like approximate to say approximate 100 milliseconds, and I would be very curious what is the interval there exactly. Yeah, no, but I'm in general, I think it's definitely an interesting idea, and yeah, I would be actually, that's a very good point to see whether these brain dynamics work across different species as well, because of course if we are talking about evolutionary advantages, then they should be somewhat reliably present in all or in most mammalian brains, and maybe also other brains, though I would be curious whether these phase transitions and wave packets and meta states could be found in like bird, like avian brains, or like where exactly can we find these, and what are the limitations of it, because that would probably make it either more convincing or like a better argument for the importance or the evolutionary advantage of these kind of these thermodynamics. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. So 100 millisecond is like for like in the experimental psychology, means the like threshold or duration time participant can perceive and response the stimuli. And I think, and also I know the rat is also the same way as like the 100 millisecond, and I think that the visual perception process is the same way as the other human one. So backward masking backward experiment for rat shows that like the 70 milliseconds is like the threshold for the GABA patch perception. So, and the author concludes that, so for rat as well as human, 70 millisecond or 1 to 100 millisecond is need to perceive the stimulus. So I understand this 100 milliseconds are the enough time for perception, right?
So this 100 millisecond time window is constrained by local connection or some local mechanism which does not, or nothing about the size of brain cell. Probably, that locally processed or integrated some information should be, propagated to different region. And if we are taking into account that, we need to start thinking about the size of brain, because if you want to, have a large brain, the activity should be propagated in a longer time. So that your point is that probably, that 100 millisecond is nothing to do with this kind of the propagation of activity across brain, but just local activity, probably very local at the synaptic level. And then, then if you want to, report that kind of, perception or information, you need to use other brain regions and which correspond to, late activity and the difference across probably species, because the information or the activity should be propagated in a different distance. But I see, yeah.
And I think that we should think the two pathway. So what pathway and where pathway, and I think where pathway is so faster than what pathway, or and this shows the rabbit action. I think it is faster than the how to say, recognize what we see. Yeah, and the other, and there is a most fastest pathway, right? So there's no how to say, not the cortical one, and just to the amygdala or something from the the thalamus, and it is I think it is more faster. It is faster than this what pathway and the where pathway. So I think Ritter's three pathway is conjuncted this discussion.
But I wonder if, because I don't think they are talking about the different pathways that much. So I wonder whether what they propose is not necessarily about the length of the information arriving to the brain, but more, and like being broadcasted. It's, well, potentially they say that, or what I roughly think they say is that with these phase transitions, the phase transitions provide like a basis, or like a something that supports rapid processing of information. And then if these phase transitions happen in approximately 10 hertz frequency, or like in every 100 milliseconds, then these phase transitions provide windows of broadcasting opportunities in every 100 milliseconds, or like roughly. But yeah, I'm not sure if I understand this correctly.
Yes. I just commented what to discuss for time scale, and if we focus on the time to how to say, yes, to understand or to discuss these perception and action. Yeah. So just I commented that. Yes, in this study, yes, the authors are focus on and discuss on the cortical network, and yeah.
Do you guys have any other questions? I think, I mean, I have a lot of things that I don't understand, but I think I'm out of somewhat sensible questions that I could ask.
So I don't have any further questions. So, and also we've already discussed roughly like 40 or 50 minutes. So, Ryuji, do you have any?
Okay, I discussed what I want to do.
Okay, then shall we finish journal club now? Okay, then see you next week.
See you.